call to order the April meeting of the Quorum Court. Would you call the roll?
Justice Ash.
Here.
Justice Byrd.
Here.
Justice Cullom. Justice Lehman. Justice Hooker. Here. Justice Jackson. Here. Justice Lewis. Justice Lewis.
Here.
Justice Mangat. Justice McClanahan. Here. Justice McDonald.
Here.
Justice White.
Here.
Justice Byrd, you can give our invitation for us.
Heavenly Father, we come to you now. Thank you, Father, for this beautiful day that you've given us. Thank you, Father, for the blessings of life. Thank you for we enjoy each and every day. And it's always be mindful that all the blessings come from you. Pray, Heavenly Father, for the world situation that is swirling around us. We know, Father, that you're in charge, and we ask that you bring peace to our world. Be with our world leaders as they go about doing the things that we would like them to do. We pray, Heavenly Father, that you be with us as a group tonight. Go about conducting your business in the county. Pray that you'll continue to bless our county, our state, and our world. Bless in Christ's name.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes.
Judge, I'll make a motion that we dispense with the reading of the minutes since we've all been provided with a copy.
All in favor? Aye. Let's go on to the treasurer's report.
Okay, the interest rate on $100,000 CD for 12 months is 0.55, and that is in the First National Bank of Eastern Arkansas and Osceola. And the sales tax report that you have in front of you, the sales tax that we received in March was down from the previous month, but it is still following the same pattern as the first 3 months. It's still the best March that we've had in the last 10 years, so that's exciting, good news. And the fund balance report is as of today. Our funds are still in good shape. Right now it's down a little bit, but it's just starting up again because of tax collections, current tax collections.
Any questions for the treasurer? Thank you, Peggy. We'll move on to the committee reports. Is there someone from the insurance committee that can give a report in place of Dr. Cullom?
Yes.
Justice McDonald.
The insurance report, we have met quite a bit in the last month. We actually started meeting, we've had about 3 or 4 meetings, so I'm going to try to combine. First off, we had been elected, added Justice Mangat to the meeting that was called on the 23rd, I'm sorry, at the annex building at 1:15. We met. And we added Justice Mangat to the insurance committee in the absence of Justice Fleet. And we also motioned that the elected new chairman, Dr. Cullom, as our new insurance committee chairman. We then proceeded to a meeting at 1:30. Then we did a Zoom meeting with Mr. Nichols concerning our present state of insurance and trying to get things that were resolved since 2019. Particularly, Mr. Nichols was stating that he had transferred some information that he had not transferred. Only 173 accounts have been paid out of like over 1,200. So basically, we sat down and requested that he send information to us. And so we agreed to do it, that he would get some information to the court, get it to California, get some progress, so we could actually, he did send it to us. So that meeting actually was very interesting. It produced obviously a lot of results because Mr. Nichols did honor his agreement, send us some information, and we began to start paying some of the claims. Our next meeting was on the 30th with Mr. Nichols, and he has sent Kelly a spreadsheet, was color coded, saying that some things had been settled. Remember, this is out of the 1,210 employees for the county. He color coded blue, which meant that we paid green, with some information yellow. So, in the short of all of it, you got a color coded document that listed some things that could be paid, some things that could not be paid. Ms. Mead asked if she had sent it to Doctor's Hospital Group, and we were not pretty much happy with Mr. Nichols, so we agreed to have another meeting with him, on April, which I think we canceled that meeting because for some particular reason we hadn't gotten this information, so we canceled it and we rescheduled another meeting. That came up on April the 20th. And to this particular point, we come down to where we basically have basically a lot of things that happen from this. There's a lot of companies have, a lot of the employees have been paid. We've actually got some good progress from it. Homes have been sent back and forth. So there were still some things that were outstanding. The committee has decided that basically if things are not completed by next meeting, we're just gonna go home and pay personnel and take care of the business for the employees, and basically whatever's left, the county will deal with it, will deal with it, the county. So that was gonna be just an insurance meeting. We have another meeting set up for next week for May the 4th with Mr. Nichols at 1:30. Hopefully, we will wrap everything up. Hopefully, he's paid everything. Justice Cullom also stated that he wanted to know what exactly, because there's some more counties, within the state that are going through the same situation. And he thinks that I think this is the consensus of the county that nobody else in the state office suffers what we have, and breaks the legal action through the attorney general's office. So that would be our next step.
Any questions for Justice McDonald? Thank you, Justice McDonald. And, you have a report on the deficiency committee?
Yes, we met on March the 29th and trying to clear up a lot of things concerning the efficiency committee. Met to see about the drainage issues as far as for the 9 drainage districts. We had Mr. Ferguson and Mr. Ramsey and also Mr. Bradley present, trying to explain what all happens and how you get the fees assessed, and there's a lot of different things back and forth going on with it, and trying to figure out how you do it. The information came out that basically from all of this is how you get your taxes, how to pay your taxes for the levy district. And basically Mr. Bradley has the formula, and the question is that once you pay it, you get an assessed, a fee is assessed, and you go ahead and pay your levy district taxes. The question came into play about Mr. Bradley somewhat receiving $500, as though it was something that was being paid up on the table, which is not true. Calling down to, it's not in the report. I did call down to West Memphis and talk to them in West Memphis that they appointed Mr. Bradley like the chairman of that levy district for, not better words, but he's over the levy district for this particular area. And that is something like a little fee that they paid to do this job for a whole year. So he is not receiving any kind of money up under the table or anything like that. That's just something like our positions. You do more work, the pay is really not to say you get paid unpaid every time, it's like a yearly fee that they pay. So the goal is that when you do go pay and get things assessed, that is basically one fee, and it's great because if you think about it, anybody else can get to that system and charge anybody whatever they feel like whatever they want. So it's actually a very good system that it has. So the question is, it's not questionable, but somewhat deceptive, because you may think that Mr. Bradley is taking a kickback or something, but he's not. It's just something that was assessed by the West Memphis district. West Memphis office that's overall the assessments for the area, so that is not anything that they question. Everything is above board, so we just table that. So I guess we may need a union just to clear all this up and everything else, so. Everything is going good.
Any questions for Justice McDonald? Thank you, Justice McDonald. Justice Ash?
Yes, sir. Personnel committee meeting was held on March 29th at 1:30 at the annex building. Our main discussions there were, in our personnel handbook, the law enforcement is shown to be able to work up to 171 hours in a 28-day cycle. Problem with that is, personnel finance had to go back and look at 2 cycles to decide whether they had entered overtime or not. We're supposed to have a resolution on tonight that would have changed that from a 171 in 28 days to 86 hours in 14 days. Also, just for general information, the state went up to 52 cents per mile for travel. We followed the state guidelines, so we didn't have to do anything with that. We also discussed the fact that Justice Freeman had not been to any meetings in 3 months, and basically the gist of that was that we asked the attorney to send him a letter pointing out to me that when he missed 3 full months, he was, in essence, his spot was vacated. Gave him a chance to present a letter of resignation rather than us having to take a vote to remove him, which he did submit a letter of resignation. I understand it will be published, so it's not going to be a resolution on tonight's agenda.
Any questions for Justice Ash? Thank you, Justice Ash. Next item on our committee reports is for the insurance committee on the 30th. Justice McDonald, did you include that with,
Yes, sir, but on the 30th, I can go back and, I did kind of include it in it.
all right, if we've already included it, we'll move on. Justice Ash on the personnel committee?
Yes, sir. We met again on April the 18th, the annex building, the meeting was called to order. Basically, we accepted Justice Fleetwood's resignation and referred it to full court for resolution being created for the government. And Justice Burge recommended that items on the agenda for the regular court meeting should be in the county judge's office by the end of business on Thursday prior to the meeting and delivered to the Quorum court members no later than the end of business on Monday. Of course, there are always going to be some emergencies, some departments, or some things, but that would be an ordinance to amend ordinance 2021-01. State that.
Any questions for Justice Ash?
Yes, sir, I've got just one. We're supposed to have an ordinance declaring that vacancy tonight, but I don't see it on our agenda.
State law requires us to publish that before we can, vote on the resolution.
Good.
Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to the next item, Justice White, Finance Committee.
Yes, sir. Finance committee met on a regular monthly meeting on April the 18th. The result of that meeting was the 6 appropriation ordinances that you see on the agenda tonight. Judge Dan Reggie with Circuit Court had asked for an appropriation regarding adult court, adult drug court. Ms. Stephanie Walford is an officer of the court and would like to do training. They have money in the drug court line item in the budget, and Judge Reggie requested that we appropriate $2,000 that would be needed for hotel meals and et cetera in regards to that training. So you'll see an appropriation ordinance for that tonight. We checked in with our attorney and the cash in lieu of benefits program. We still haven't got that quite together yet.
It's moving along, I promise. It's a difficult area of law, and I'm happy to get assistance on it.
Not a problem. But to prevent a lag in benefit payments to the employees, You'll see an appropriation ordinance tonight for $3,932.50 that will be needed to extend the employee benefit program that we're currently running. Then on the sheriff's cars, in our original budget for 2022, we appropriated money for 6 new cars, plus 2 additional cars that will be covered by insurance. The appropriation was about $180,000 in the original budget. Then we got into the revenue replacement fund, which were originally the ARPA funds, and we decided that we'd add an additional 10 cars, for a total of 18 cars. Coming from Justice Jackson's committee, they recommended that we take all 10 cars out of the revenue replacement funds, and in doing so, that freed up that $180,000 that was in the original 2022 budget, and we'd like to zero that line item out and put that money back in county general so it can be used in other places. So you'll see an appropriation ordinance tonight amending the budget and taking that money out and putting it back in the general fund. Then we had gotten anxious, I guess, in hiring a state lobbying firm. We're very excited to employ the Mullenix firm in Little Rock as a state lobbying firm for Mississippi County. We have appropriated $75,000 out of the revenue replacement funds to do that with, but found out it's a little bit of a thin ice issue. It's not exactly no, but it's not a clear yes, and we don't want anything but clear yeses anytime we use those federal funds. So we'd like to back up just a little bit, take that money out of the revenue replacement and move it back over and appropriate it out of county general. We want clear, solid footing and standing anytime that we use those revenues. So you'll see an amendment to that. We also are appropriating revenue replacement funds, or ARPA funds, for a consultant that will be working directly with both the judge's office and with Peggy's office and making sure that any appropriations that we do are on solid footing. So we're going to appropriate $10,000 to get us a start for the consultant out of the revenue replacement funds. That was coming as a recommendation from Justice Jackson's ARPA committee. We talked about the landfill credit card acceptance policy. Justice Bird brought us up to date, and information was received, and we're continuing to work on being able to take credit cards, debit cards, and direct deposits are also being looked at. I think it will facilitate our collections out of the landfill. Tonight, we'll see the cleanup budget on our agenda, cleaning up the 2021 budget is a normal process that we go through every year. And then we discussed the Jessup employee benefit comparison quote that we do every even year, this being 2022. Time for us to do another. I mean, what it does is it takes all our employee positions and does a comparable study with other like entities, which would include other governmental entities, counties, cities, and even private industries, where comparable job descriptions are compared on a pay basis to make sure that we're staying up with industry standards and giving our employees the very best that we can afford. We looked over and discussed briefly March expenditures. We're tracking very well on the county budget. All the elected officials are doing a very nice job. Then we talked a little bit about our county clerk and circuit clerk's records. And the moving over into the new courthouse procedures that will be involved, the facilities, storage facilities that will be needed, looking at maybe upgrading some of the facilities, some of the counters, some of the files that we have, and that's still under work and study. Circuit Clerk Mason stated that she needed a professional company to help her move back to her office to the new courthouse. The judge reassured her that those will be available to her and that we will have that done whenever the time comes. And then we talked a little bit about, Ms. Curry talked a little bit about the old books that were scanned back previously about 12 years ago. And the fact that they were cut apart when they came back to us, in fact, one book would be divided and actually made more like 2 books. They're being degraded as they're being accessed, and we'd like to look at restoration processes and procedures and cost. So we're hoping to get some estimates received from some companies on that restoration project.
Any questions for Justice White? Thank you, Justice White. And, Justice McDonald, you're right, you met many times in the last month. I assume the next item on the agenda, I assume we covered it. Justice White, do you have a report on planning and development?
Yes, sir. It wasn't a very long meeting. The primary purpose of the planning and development meeting on April the 21st at 1:30 was a tax back agreement for the Sierra Group. They're going to take some of the steel out of Newport and actually use it to manufacture steel panels that will be used like in steel roof. They have, they're going to make rolls that will actually be processed, painted, shaped, and cut to length on custom projects. Very nice industry to come in, and all they asked for was just a tax back agreement where they get their state local taxes back on any of the equipment that they use and purchase and putting the process together. We talked a little bit about the Southward plant in Manila, and the fact that it's interested in purchasing the federal mall building. A $6 to $7 million purchase, 50 new jobs will be added, and they're not really asking for anything yet. We just wanted to know that is a project in work. Cliff mentioned to us Majestic Steel and their ability to be finished this summer and hoping this fall. And their HR department has already expressed interest in participating in Work Here, Live Here program. Cliff, actually, one of the most exciting things we could talk about was a trip that he and Dr. Shimwell from college and two gentlemen from the state made to Atlanta and the call center project that they're actively working on to come to Mississippi County. This project could easily employ 400 to 600 people. I think we've identified maybe number 500 for the moment. It would be inside jobs, not necessarily heavy manufacturing jobs, and it's not robocall type stuff. It's actually a call center where they're actually receiving calls for businesses to buy a contract. It's exactly the kind of jobs that we were asked for when we were working on revoting for the economic development tax. This is jobs that the female population of Mississippi County could actually feel very good. It would be a very good catch for Mississippi County, and it's looking very, very promising. Then the Work Here, Live Here program itself, moving forward. All the legal documents have been submitted to the industries that are interested, and we're simply waiting for responses back to them. Remember, Work Here, Live Here is not county sponsored. It's county supported, but it's not a county program. It's going to be an industry program. And it looks like it's going to be successful. We're getting more and more input and feedback. This is going to be a successful program for Mississippi County.
Any questions for Justice White? Thank you, Justice White. Justice McClanahan.
Thank you, Judge. The Social Services Committee met on April 21st at 2 o'clock in the annex. This was a follow-up meeting to the meeting that we have had last month regarding several questions that had come up regarding the senior center and its connection, for lack of better terms, to the county. We did have Melissa Prater from East Area Agency on Aging present, as well as Amanda Adams and Barbara Mitchell, who are directors for the program. After I basically just reported my findings of all the research that I had done to the committee for the Senior Citizen Center, in a nutshell, basically what I believe happened was the Senior Citizen Center in 1976 was sponsored by the EOC, and the EOC and the director of the Senior Citizen at that time got with Judge Banks and decided that it was going to be better to be sponsored by the county. However, that was prior to the forming of the formal Quorum court, so therefore there was never a resolution made or passed by this court regarding that due to the time when that happened. But since that time, since '77, they have been a part of our budget. They have been part of basically our personnel. Everything has flown through the county during that time since 1976. They have had considerable cuts in their funding over the years. There was questions that had came up of whether or not we were potentially losing funding because the county was making up part of that budget, and I found that not to be the case. One of the interesting things that I did find that the state and federal grants, there's a couple of different sources. Number one, those are population, and it's based on the senior population of the county. So the 2010 census, I believe, really is what hurt the funding and caused some of the confusion. I know that there was questions where we went from giving them about $40,000 a year to all of a sudden we're giving them six figures. The time frame of that was basically crossed over that 2010 census. So it makes sense that that was a significant amount of funding that was lost with that census. That's a census that dropped the county below 50,000. It caused a lot of different changes in the county during that particular census. So that's the time frame when the transfers seem to increase. However, the transfers have been in excess of six figures since dating back as far back as the treasurer. As far as her software would go back to about 2014, and we've been transferring six figures to their supplement their budget ever since then. The other part of the funding that comes from state and federal, those particular programs were widely funded by cigarette tax, which has obviously had a decrease in the last 20 years because of the funding that's been put into it to decrease smoking, which is a good thing for people's health, but not a bad thing when they're funded by cigarette tax. So that's where some of the confusion lies with the terminology issue. They are not a constitutionally charged department of the county. They are just the county is their sponsoring organization that basically administers their pay. They have to have a pass-through. So East Area Arkansas on Aging is the funding source from the state and federal, but they find sponsors of the different locations, and some sponsors are private throughout the counties. Some are counties. We are not the only county that acts as a sponsor in their particular division. There are others that do that as well. They cited that the county, the programs that are sponsored by counties or municipalities do tend to be the strongest programs. Another question that it did was come out that the auditors did not have a problem with the way that it's currently being handled with the county. There was a question of whether or not it appears that historically the director of the Senior Citizen Center has been signing that sponsorship contract with Area Agency on Aging, and the committee felt like that moving forward that was an act that the judge should be signing. I did find one contract where Judge Carney had signed back in 2014, but I believe that there was an absence of a senior director at that time. That's why Judge Carney signed it, because all the prior contracts were signed by the directors as one since. So basically I made a recommendation to the committee. Oh, let me back up, 501c3. So East Area Agency on Aging is a 501c3. They are not a governmental department of the state. So that was something that had come in for question. So one thing that's interesting about that is, as the sponsor of the Senior Citizen Center, we are not guaranteed we are not locking ourselves into supplementing their budget at any certain dollar figure. That's whatever the county can afford and so it chooses by the finance committee to fund them. But because East Area Agency on Aging is a 501c3, we can take benefit of that, and if there is a private entity, organization, or any fundraising that's done, if someone wants to donate to help the senior citizens program in Mississippi County, they can donate to the East Area Agency on Aging. They receive a tax deduction, and they just earmark those funds to be used in Mississippi County, and East Area Agency on Aging has to use them here. So that is the way that we can actually benefit. If there are industries or private companies that would like to help fund that program, that is the source for them to be able to do that tax deductible. It did come up that the East Area Agency on Aging does own the facility that the Reliable Senior Citizen Center is housed in. Justice White and I did actually visit, the judge actually came as well that day to have lunch out there. They've made considerable improvements in that building. They've spent quite a bit of money as far as replacing heat units and lowering the ceiling to make it more appropriate and more energy efficient. So that was another thing that I feel like that the county probably is more beneficial to continue to just pay rent on that facility, and we don't have to take care of any maintenance on that property. So there was a resolution entered to the committee, and they were approved to move that resolution forward, just basically stating all of these facts, that the county has been sponsoring it, we are aware that the county is sponsoring it, the county is sponsoring it voluntarily, and basically just the gist of those. However, with the new rules of the agenda, we did not get this on tonight's agenda. We didn't feel like that it was an emergency, so we won't see that resolution tonight. You will see that resolution at next month's meeting.
Any questions for Justice McClanahan? Thank you, Justice McClanahan. That was a lot of research, cleared up a lot of questions asked by me, and needs to be a matter of record for future reform courts and county judges. Justice Jackson, Energy and Property.
Thank you, Judge. So the Energy and Property Committee met on April the 21st. It was more of an informative committee meeting. There was no resolution or ordinance needed. We do feel like Mr. Reggie has found a solution to the Osceola pigeon problem here at the courthouse. And so this originally Renaissance Roofing had given us a quote, and then we found two additional companies that gave quotes. It's going to be a fairly expensive fix, but we do feel like we found it. The one that I think you and the committee both agreed with would be to do the one that had the that included the material and labor. It was a turnkey job. And Justice Ash did ask about what the life expectancy was. And so I did look into that. It is put up with steel cabling, but I haven't gotten a firm answer back on how long that's going to take. So we did receive the last payout for the re-roof project. That was, and actually this was to clear up the retainage fee. And so it wasn't necessarily Blyville or Osceola, it was just a Blyville and Osceola. It was both of them together to complete the re-roof, just to complete the re-roof project. And I do apologize, I did get some wrong information on the next part. So there are some new ceramic tiles that are chipped. And so the company that manufactured the tiles did say that it would not create any type of issue, and they did offer to give a quote to Renaissance, but Renaissance is replacing them under the warranty. So they are going to replace those at no cost to the county. So, and it was
What about the scaffolding?
I don't know if they're going to. Oh, I do think they're going to use a lift truck. They're just going to lift them up there. No, I did read that correctly. So yes, they're going to replace them. So, okay. So, we just went over the budget. There was a couple of additional change orders that really did not amount to much. We still have the construction contingency of $30,000 with the anticipated moving expenses to move back into the courthouse, $125,000, and quite a bit, over $200,000 in undesignated funds. There was a couple of questions about, just the length of time that CNI was taking to complete the building. We are calculating the liquidated damages. Currently, as of last week, they were right at $43,000. We have had a few expenses due to the delay in finishing. We had to take out insurance policy. We had to rent the building, and then also for the furniture, and then also reschedule the furniture. So those things, are costing us a little additional money. Mr. Ruby, the architect, is having to make additional trips up here. So we are keeping with that. We talked a little bit about some additional costs that would probably have to incur once CNI is out of the building, such as sprinklers just need to be re-insulated. I think Janet, Ms. Curry, and Ms. Mason needs some additional bookshelves and potentially some other things, some new desktops. I think some costs are in the budget. However, there's a couple other things that are not in the budget. So, I pretty much just brought everybody up to speed. I did receive an email today about the elevator. So the elevator is supposed to be inspected next week. And then they will, schedule Mr. Pinner, to come back and install the shelves once the elevator is working. And they are hoping, to do the first touch list the first week of May. That's what they, I am only as good as the information you give me, so.
Any questions for Justice Jackson? Thank you, Justice Jackson. We'll move on to, our resolution. And Ms. Carter, would you read the resolution?
Yes, sir. Resolution number R 2022-9. A resolution certifying the county's endorsement of Sierra Group and Associates Construction LLC's participation in the tax-back program as authorized by annotated code 15-4-2706D of the Consolidated Incentive Act of 2003. Whereas in order to be considered for participation in the tax-back program, the local government must endorse a business to participate in the tax-back program. And whereas the county government of Mississippi County, Arkansas must authorize a refund of local sales and use taxes as provided in the Consolidated Incentive Act of 2003, and whereas said endorsement must be made on a specific form which is provided by the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, and whereas Sierra Group and Associates Construction LLC, DBA Sierra Group Roofing and Solar, located at 101 West Walnut in Rival, Arkansas, has sought to participate in the program and more specifically has requested benefits accruing from new construction of the specific facility. And whereas Sierra Group has agreed to furnish the county all necessary information for compliance. Now therefore be it resolved by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that one, the government of Mississippi County, Arkansas, hereby certifies the endorsement of the Sierra Group for benefits from the sales and use tax refunds as provided by annotated code 15-4-2706 D of the Consolidated Incentive Act of 2003. 2, the Department of Finance and Administration is authorized to refund local sales and use taxes to Sierra Group. 3, this resolution shall be in effect immediately upon its passage.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Is there discussion? Ms. Carter, would you call the roll?
Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Byrd?
Yes.
Justice Pepper?
Yes.
Justice Jackson?
Yes.
Justice Lewis?
Yes.
Justice McConaughey?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to our ordinances. It's next on the agenda. Ms. Carter, would you read the appropriation?
Appropriation ordinance number O 2022-23. An amendment to appropriation ordinance O 2022-8. An ordinance authorizes the county to hire a state government relations firm. Whereas certain functions of the government of Mississippi County, Arkansas are in need of funding, including an appropriation that will permit the hiring of a firm that will assist the county with state government relations through professional services, including consultancy and lobbying efforts, and whereas the firm doing business as Mulinix and Associates LLC has been selected to assist the county in the capacity, and its rates are $6,500 monthly or $75,000 annually. And whereas the Finance Committee has reviewed and approved an appropriation of $75,000 from County General and has submitted it to the Quorum Court. Now therefore be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that one, the following appropriation modifications are hereby made for the fiscal year 2022 budget. Slot or account number 1000.0100.3009 for contract labor or legal advisor in the amount of $75,000. Two, all appropriations previously authorized, approved, and made as to all other offices, departments, and agencies of county government, and all other funds not hereof changed are to remain as previously appropriated. Detailed provisions of said appropriations are reflected in the schedule of specific items listed by account numbers within the category for each office and filed in the office of the county clerk. Three, this ordinance in an appropriation ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately from and after its passage and approval by the county judge.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Is there discussion?
Judge, we're simply moving the money from, revenue replacement fund back out county general.
No more comment? Ms. Carter, would you call the roll, please?
Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Byrd?
Yes.
Justice Hepler?
Yes.
Justice Jackson?
Yes.
Justice Lewis?
Yes.
Justice McClanahan?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to the next appropriation ordinance. Ms. Carter, would you read the ordinance, please?
Appropriation ordinance number O 2022-24. An ordinance authorizing appropriations to cover expenses that will be incurred from the upcoming adult drug court conference. Whereas certain functions of the government of Mississippi County, Arkansas are in need of funding, including an appropriation that will cover expenses associated with the upcoming adult drug court conference. And whereas the expenses are estimated to be about $2,000, and whereas this appropriation has been reviewed by the Finance Committee, who has approved this action and has sent it to the Quorum Court. Now therefore be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that one, the following appropriation modifications are hereby made for the fiscal year 2022 budget. Slot or account number 3028.0405.3030 for travel in the amount of $2,000. Number two, all appropriations previously authorized, approved, and made as to all other offices, departments, and agencies of county government, and all other funds not hereof changed are to remain as previously appropriated. Detailed provisions of said appropriations are reflected in the schedule of specific items listed by account numbers within the category for each office and filed in the office of the county clerk. Three, this ordinance being an appropriation ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately from and after its passage and approval by the county judge.
Move for adoption.
Is there discussion? Ms. Carter, would you call the roll?
Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Byrd?
Yes.
Justice Hepler?
Yes.
Justice Jackson?
Yes.
Justice Lewis?
Yes.
Justice McClanahan?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to the next appropriation ordinance.
Appropriation ordinance number O 2022-25. An ordinance authorizing appropriations to enter into a service contract and to compensate ARPA consulting for hours already performed. Whereas certain functions of the government of Mississippi County, Arkansas are in need of funding, including an appropriation that will authorize the county to enter into a contract with a consulting firm who will advise the county on all matters relating to the use or reporting of ARPA revenue replacement funds. And whereas the county will initially pay the firm $10,000 and then periodically compensate the advising firm based upon hours of labor performed. And whereas this appropriation has been reviewed by the Finance Committee, who approved this action and has sent it to the full Quorum Court. Now therefore be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that one, the following appropriations modifications are hereby made for the fiscal year 2022 budget. Slot or account number 1000.111.3009 for professional services in the amount of $10,000. Two, all appropriations previously authorized, approved, and made as to all other offices, departments, and agencies of county government, and all other funds not hereinabove changed are to remain as previously appropriated. Detailed provisions of said appropriations are reflected in the schedule of specific items listed by capitals within the category for each office and filed in the office of the county court clerk. 3, this ordinance being an appropriation ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately from and after its passage and approval by the county clerk.
Move for adoption. And move and second. Comes up for discussion. You're not. We have a second, didn't
We have a second. Is there discussion?
Yes, I don't think that the title is correct. And so the ARPA consultant has not, we're not paying him any money right now. We were just funding the line item so that once they do send us a bill for hours,
already performed service.
no.
Well, I mean, we just contacted, the first time last week, so I don't know if that's correct either. I mean, I was wondering about where it says, well, initially paid them $10,000. I'm not sure about that.
I thought we were just paying them as by invoices.
We are. That's
Work 10 hours, they bill us 10
Right.
hours, we pay them.
Yeah, the idea was just to fund the line item so that there would already be money appropriated, so that when they did invoice us for hours worked, that there would already be some money there, so we could go ahead and, pay the invoice. But they have not done any work.
Would you like to move to amend the ordinance prior to voting on it?
Yes. I'd like to, move that we amend the ordinance.
Striking the last part after the
Yeah,
word
this is
and.
striking the last part, just to compensate, I think for hours already performed, I think we could strike that, and then, also strike,
The secretary.
yes, the,
Entire paragraph?
well, maybe just whereas, periodically, just the, yeah, the county will initially pay the firm $10,000, if we could just strike that part.
We're gonna strike.
We're compensated, but yes,
The advice and information on the way.
yes, that would be correct.
So,
Did you get that?
Well, two things. For one, there was just a misunderstanding in the initial ordinance. They said for hours worked. I think that means they already did. Right? Secondly, I don't know the propriety of a contract that doesn't have a set term of money. Because if you don't have a set term of, we're going to do a contract for this amount, I don't think it has the session for us.
Well, we're not limiting them to $10,000. We're wanting to enter into a contract for the length of the.
That's just part of periodically. Because periodically contemplates a series of small contracts that we just keep doing. I don't think we really need definite.
What do you recommend?
A series of small contracts without a rate. We just do contracts that are regular biannual. That way we at least know when we execute contracts with the same term, no contract for. Otherwise, you're dealing with like an indefinite service contract. That's not allowed.
So we think this may cost, the high number that's been thrown out was upwards of $200,000 plus. But we just want to get our feet wet, and that's why we were only appropriating $10,000 initially.
Oh, yeah, and that part, that was just a misunderstanding. I thought that meant they already did something, that we're paying for those hours.
So do you think we would need to do an appropriation for every invoice they send?
I think the appropriation could be of any amount that, the Quorum Court deems appropriate. I don't think it would have to go along in conjunction with the contract. And the contract, I believe, does have a set time period.
Yeah, that's what Thomas called. So I'm conflating the contract with and everything. Draw all that. Everything has sets their own.
So the amendment is she holding to.
Oh, no, the amendment's perfectly fine. I just wanted to explain the misunderstanding.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
Right, right, so the amendment that we're gonna vote on now is to strike 4 hours already performed in the title. And what is the second part of the?
The county will initially pay the firm $10,000. We're going to strike that out of the second paragraph.
Just to take, whereas the county will periodically compensate the advising firm.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Is there discussion? And so we will call the roll and vote on amending the ordinance. Mr. Burge, you call the roll, please.
Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Byrd?
Yes.
Justice Humphrey?
Yes.
Justice Jackson?
Yes.
Justice Lewis?
Yes.
Justice McConaughey?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
Does any of the Quorum Court members desire to have it reread? Does everybody understand is there any discussion? Mr. Curry, would you call the roll, please?
Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Byrd?
Yes.
Justice Kepler? Yes. Justice Jackson?
Yes.
Justice Lewis?
Yes.
Justice McConaughey?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to the next appropriation ordinance, which is cleanup ordinance.
Appropriation ordinance number O-2022-26. An ordinance providing supplemental appropriation for the operation of Mississippi County government, including increases and/or changes in appropriations for certain departments of county government for the calendar and fiscal year of 2021 and for other purposes. Where it is necessary that certain adjustments be made regarding revenues and appropriation of county funds for the operation of Mississippi County government during the calendar fiscal year of 2021, with original appropriations in some instances to be modified to cover expenses for the county government during the year of 2021. Whereas the needed changes in appropriations have been set forth in a schedule dated and signed by the appropriate officers and employees of Mississippi County government and filed in the office of the county clerk as required by law. Whereas the 2021 year-end revenue adjustments and the 2021 year-end expenditure adjustments are attached as Exhibit A and Exhibit B respectively. Whereas the Quorum Court is authorized by law to alter, amend, and change the original appropriations made for the operation of county government during the calendar year of 2021 to provide final appropriations, and whereas the final appropriations for specific offices and agencies of county government require changes and adjustments between the several offices and its agencies. Now therefore be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that 1, the fiscal year 2021 budget for the operation of certain offices and departments of Mississippi County government be and hereby are revised or amended as provided in the attached exhibit and incorporated herein by reference. Number 2, all appropriations previously authorized, approved, and made as to all other offices and departments of agencies of county government and all other funds not hereby changed and to remain as previously appropriated. Detailed provisions of said appropriations are reflected in the schedule of specific items listed by account numbers within the category for each office and filed in the office of the county court clerk. 3, if any provisions of the ordinance is held invalid, such invalidity shall not affect other provisions. This ordinance is hereby declared to be severable for such purposes. 4, this ordinance being an appropriation ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately from and after its passage and approval by the county judge.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Is there discussion? Mr. Curry, would you call the roll, please?
Sir. Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Byrd?
Yes.
Justice Kepler? Yes. Justice Jackson?
Yes.
Justice Lewis?
Yes.
Justice McClanahan?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to the next appropriation ordinance.
Appropriation ordinance number 2022-27. An ordinance authorizing appropriations for the operation of the Mississippi County government, including extra compensation payments to replace discontinued HRA accounts. Where certain functions of the county government are in need of funding, whereas HRA accounts will be discontinued effective January 21st, 2022. Whereas employees enrolled in these accounts have been paid extra compensation through payroll on the first payroll in March 2022, and then again in April 2022. These employees shall now be paid for the month of May 2022. Whereas this extra compensation will be reported and taxed as regular compensation, and whereas this appropriation has been reviewed and recommended by the Finance Committee, now therefore be enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that one, the following appropriations modifications are hereby, the following appropriations modifications attached herein as Exhibit A are hereby made for the fiscal year 2022 budget. 2, all appropriations previously authorized, approved, and made as to all other offices, departments, and agencies of county government, and all other funds not hereinabove changed or to remain as previously appropriated. Detailed provisions of said appropriations are reflected in the schedule of specific items listed by account numbers within the category for each office and following the office of the county court clerk. 3, this ordinance and an appropriation ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately from and after its passage and approval by the county judge.
Move for adoption.
Is there discussion? Clerk, will you call the roll?
Justice Ash? Justice Burge?
Yes.
Justice Hupler?
Yes.
Justice Jackson?
Yes.
Justice Lewis?
Yes.
Justice McClanahan?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to our last ordinance. Ms. Carter, would you read the appropriation?
Appropriation ordinance number 2022-28. Excuse me, an ordinance reducing the MCSO vehicle budget line. Whereas certain functions of the government of Mississippi County, Arkansas are in need of funding, including an appropriation that will zero out the sheriff's department's budget line for vehicles. And whereas the county has previously appropriated $180,000 to Mississippi County Sheriff's Department budget for purchasing said vehicles. And whereas the ARPA fund has been designated to pay this appropriation, therefore making the previously appropriated money duplicative, and whereas this appropriation has been reviewed by the Finance Committee, who approved this action and has sent it to Quorum Court. Now therefore be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that one, the following appropriation modifications are hereby made for the fiscal year 2022 budget. Slot or account number 1000.0400.4005 for vehicles in the amount of minus $180,000. 2, all appropriations previously authorized, approved, and made as to all other offices, departments, and agencies of county government, and all other funds not hereinabove changed are to remain as previously appropriated. Detailed provisions of said appropriations are reflected in the schedule of specific items listed by account numbers within the category for each office and filed in the office of the county court clerk. Number 3, this ordinance and an appropriation ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately from and after its passage and approval by the county judge.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Is there discussion? Clerk, would you call the roll?
Justice Hatch,
Yes.
Justice Burge,
Yes.
Justice Cutler,
Yes.
Justice Jackson,
Yes.
Justice Lewis,
Yes.
Justice McClanahan,
Yes.
Justice McDonald,
Yes.
Justice White.
Yes.
We'll move on to new business. Is there any new business to come before the court? Old business? Announcements?
Judge, the three of us, you and Justice McClanahan and I all went to the Senior Citizens Center here in Blythe a couple of weeks ago. And heard the social services committee meeting, we announced that Justice McClanahan and I are also going to the Manila Senior Citizens day after tomorrow, Thursday, at 11:30 to have lunch over there and just view the Senior Citizens Center there in Manila. And we open an invitation to anybody that cares to go. We just need to know if somebody cares to join us so that we can give them a specific number.
And that is gonna occur tomorrow?
Day after tomorrow.
Day after tomorrow.
Thursday at 11:30.
In Manila.
Yes, sir. And anybody, be welcome, we just need to know the number.
Well, I do appreciate that research that, Mr. McClanahan performed, and I think this is a much needed, information to go into the official record.
She did a great job.
Very good job. I appreciate your work very much. Any announcements?
Dr. Mike, the Atlas grand opening was tomorrow. I think everyone received invitations. It runs from 10 to 2 unless you want.
That's the Atlas expansion. We have a lot going on in Mississippi County. Without any further announcements, entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.